guess a lot of your work revolves around bio, right? And just kind of applying biology and combining it with other technical fields, combining it with software. I guess just like I'm curious, what got you into bio in the first place? What do you find beautiful about bio? What pulled you into it?
Okay, so first, I actually just liked philosophy and physics, and I wanted to do great physics. It turned out we were going to die, right? Like when you discover that you have mortality, and for me, I had made a sort of like resolution when I was in grade 10. It was like, okay, I'm going to use science to live longer. Therefore, which very ambitious and very out there, but like it just made me feel good. It made the anxiety sort of feel like, okay, I've got something I can apply my efforts to just make some progress at least. Obviously super uncertain. So the tagline that I actually have on my LinkedIn right now, and I've had it for literally, I think, 15 years, is in order to understand the universe, we must first understand ourselves. Which is to say, I want to do physics. Like physics is actually my first love. But we got to do biology first in order to make ourselves live longer and potentially be more intelligent. And then we'll be able to do physics properly.
That makes a lot of sense. And how do you also relate that with the, I guess, like you mentioned, they're also making ourselves more intelligent, augmented intelligence. Sounds a lot like there's a lot from the AI space that we could pull from and take advantage of there. How do you think about applying AI?
So connecting your second question to the first, it turns out biology is the most complex and interesting manifestation of physics that exists. In a weird sort of way, we are studying physics by studying biology. You're just studying like it in the limit, right? And then, okay, so now with AI, turns out the reason we've gotten as far as we have with AI is because we have an example of AI. The human brain, right? It literally, like, you ask Elias at Skyver about, like, you know, how he's thinking about AI, and he's like, well, there's still parts of, like, esoteric parts of nervous systems that we still can't replicate or we can't copy in silico, in computers. And that's what's holding us back. It's literally biomimicry. So it is a little funny, and it makes sense that we would study biology, you know, nature, the mother of all compilers, running biocode, DNA, evolving it through natural selection over 3 billion years. That is some pretty amazing engineering results that we are fortunate to get to sample from, to create. And so, yes, AI from bio, and then funny enough, AI back to bio to help us understand biology even better, and then repeat
feedback loop between the two, and then use one to kind of ratchet the other one up, right?
I think so.
Yeah. One thing that I found pops up in your work, about a couple blog posts about it, is this question of consciousness. And I feel like that's one of the big puzzle pieces that we still have to figure out. How do we, replicate that with the silicon stack, right? We're making all these advances, making all this progress, but that seems to be the one elusive thing that we seemingly can't replicate yet.
The funny thing about consciousness is, it is the hard problem. And as in, neurology is a hard problem. GPT-7 is a hard problem, but it's a tractable problem. So it's easy in that framing. I don't know that we need to understand consciousness in order to make progress here. If we were an unethical society, we could actually just be like, fuck it, let's just keep building. The AI may or may not be conscious. We may or may not understand our own consciousness. Let's just make ourselves more intelligent. Let's just make more AIs. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. And obviously that has ethical implications, but that'll be more like a philosophical, ethical conversation than like a limiting us from moving forward conversation.
Well, 100%. Yeah, I don't think it limits us from going forward. I guess I'm just more coming at it from this perspective that, evolution recruited consciousness for some purpose.
Well, we don't know that. Potentially, maybe.
Potentially, maybe, right? We're humans. We have consciousness. It seems like if consciousness was this useless thing, then we maybe wouldn't have it, right? So from that point of view, maybe there's some leverage or some benefits we can gain if we figure out like what consciousness actually is and then apply it to AI systems. But I agree with you that it's not something that necessarily should hold us back. We should just keep going and see where it leads us. But
it's a super interesting thesis you're positing. The funny thing is that, like, yeah, there's the zombie thought experiment, which is like, could you imagine a human that doesn't have consciousness but still does the human stuff? And I think you kind of can. And like, calculators have been calculating for us and doing useful work for a long time, and we don't posit consciousness to them. Bacteria are just very complicated calculators, kind of, right? Like, they're like thermostats. They move toward food because there's a little bit more concentration in this direction. And when on the right side there's more concentration, you turn that way programmatic, like arithmetically, right? Like, as an algorithm. So, it looks intelligent when it does that, but it's not intelligent, actually. Is a thermostat conscious? Does it need consciousness to thermostat? If maybe, but then you're sort of positing a very fundamental aspect of the universe itself. It's like anytime there's information processing that is useful, goodness, would be super interesting to understand and like that. I just don't know if we're going to make any traction. I don't even know where to start.
I don't know either. Well, that's the big mystery, right? I can certainly imagine something that walks like a human, talks like a human, and yet doesn't have consciousness in the way that we do. It's like something like the Tesla bot or one of the Boston Dynamics robots. But give it all the sensors that a human has. Run some kind of advanced AI model on it, and basically you have something that is very close to a human. Can interact with humans, do human things. But nonetheless, like I guess the thing that I wonder about is what advantage does consciousness actually give to us?
You're asking me as if I might have an answer here. I just don't fucking know, man. I can ponder.
I don't expect you to have an answer.
God, Stephen. I appreciate the questions, and I appreciate that you want to go in this direction. And it is definitely. And I'll give you my. I think this is humble. But I do have interesting ideas on it. Like panpsychism is a really beautiful idea. I think it's this idea that like everything is a little bit conscious in the universe. We don't know, like in a fundamental way, in the same way that we don't understand consciousness, we fundamentally don't understand why radioactive isotopes explode or decay in a reverse exponential manner. It's weird. It's super mysterious. Like no other collection of particles work that way, where it's like half. And then another year from now, half. Another year from now, half. Like, why half? How does it know? It knows. It's like weird. But it's like scientists just think of it as like a fundamental law of the universe. You just don't question it further than that. Panpsychism, it's a sort of like non-answer. Like, it's just as fundamental as gravity. Consciousness just permeates the universe. It's birthed in, and whenever you have information processing, it goes. So, like, now you're sort of positing in sort of like builder mindset, which I love. On that fit, let's take advantage of, or like let's capitalize on it, or whatever. Let's like move forward, understanding it better, so we can engineer it or something, right?
I feel like it's this whole world that is severely underexplored. It's this whole paradigm of science that we're not even quite tapping into yet. There's even debate as to whether it is a paradigm or not, or like how do you even define it, how do you measure it, whatever. Yeah, it feels like there's this whole world of science to be done. We're only scratching the surface of.
And so,
and that science, I think, is very crucial to your kind of North Star, your central mission of how do we understand biology? How do we recruit AI to understand biology at all?
I see that. I'm sorry. That's my telegram. Oh, AI will get it.
I'm the one who sent the message.
You sent behind the camera is the guy who just fucked it up. Don't worry, AI will just smooth this all out, right? So yes, and I started with two. I said longevity and intelligence as the biology thing to work on before we understand physics super thoroughly. Intelligence. I have this thesis which is at increasing levels of intelligence, you get novel phenomenological categories. Like, love is probably a thing that ants, like, only a little kind of tiny bit understand and get. And then dogs, more. But not like humans. Humans write Shakespeare plays about love in these weird, complex, intricate, dynamic way that I think dogs don't approach. And are we at the tip of the iceberg? Is there, 99% that we're missing out on phenomenologically that we can't even imagine? And that actually touches on consciousness, because we think of love as being a very consciousness-y thing, right? Can you love if you're not conscious? You could probably behave as if you love, like a bacteria always chasing its friend. Does it love the other bacteria? I don't think so. But humans have emotions and the feelings and the complexity of the, like, whatever even is that. And with more intelligence, it's possible you have more consciousness. So that relationship and new phenomena is something that is the greatest mystery to explore, in my opinion.
How are you defining intelligence? Because I've heard a lot of people define it in different ways, and I think it's like we intuitively kind of understand what it is, but I wonder if you have a specific.
So this is at least one structure to think about it. The size of the arc of your goals being larger and larger, and the ability to sort of like problem solve and troubleshoot on a diverse range of things in order to achieve longer term goals. So GPT-4 right now, for example, can't achieve long term goals. When it was first released, everybody thought Auto GPT was going to be like the B's and E's, but it turns out, because a little bit of error is introduced in every decision, that compounds and it breaks the chain. Maybe we'll get AIs that have longer and longer goal arcs. And I think the longest goal arc is the greatest intelligence. Something like that would be an interesting model to think about it on. And I'm not saying that's the definition of intelligence, but it's an interesting perspective.
It's an interesting one to for sure. Yeah, that makes me think of a lot of philosophies throughout, well, basically all of human history, and they all seem to come to this piece of wisdom that, well, you should be thinking in the most long term frame possible. I think like the recent Silicon Valley thing is long termism, right? They literally call their ideology long termism. But even if you think about something like Christianity, there are a lot of people who would say that the core of Christianity is this kind of like, well, like, how can we make decisions that are sustainable out into infinity, right? Like, what is the ultimate good? What is the ultimate kind of like?
And that's where survival becomes sort of like a prime directive, and like long-term survival. So Christianity is an awesome operating system for long-term survival for medieval peasants and even their kings, and like just the whole system. It makes sense. Now we are being afforded the opportunity to explore realms that are potentially outside of that, that system. And so I think it's worth trying other things, and
yeah,
that's what I'm excited by, at least. So yes, for survival, but I think survival's not everything.
Yeah, I came across the post of yours. We were talking about the kind of like formulating modern purpose, I think it's called, something like that, right?
That's it. You got it.
How do you what's yeah, I'm just curious to hear expand on that more. I guess the two things you're thinking about is just scaling up intelligence and living longer.
So yeah. So the living longer part is like, I want to survive. It's a bit of a selfish one, honestly, in a weird way, right? Like, we all have to ask ourselves this question. And a lot of people have had like near-death experiences, or they've been depressed and like suicidal. Like, I've interviewed a lot of people, and by interview I mean just like casually, like, just talk to everybody. And I ask this question to everybody. And it's interesting how defeated some people can be about it. And then I pitch them like, do you not realize that 1,000 years from now, not even 100 years from now, the world is going to be amazing. Like, it's going to be remarkably different and incredible in ways that we can't imagine. Don't you want to just like survive and check it out? Like, at least that? And then beyond that, like, well, anyway, sorry, I'm kind of geeking out at this point, but like being able to try to answer questions like why is there something rather than nothing, right? Like these very fundamental, like moving kind of questions. And then for some people, you tell them like you ask them that, and they'll say, well, it doesn't move me in the way that it clearly moves you. And then we can get into the first blog that I wrote, the porcupine argument, which is, should we not want to change our own nature? You happen to have been born desiring sexuality and being uninspired by the big questions in the world, the big universal, the big cosmic questions. But if you could go to a lab and flip a switch, and suddenly you're less sexually interested and more interested in cosmic, epic, awesome questions, would you not flip that switch? It seems like a no-brainer. So that's what I would do. Anyway, so that's in terms of like directing where you would go. And then to your actual question about formulating modern purpose, to wrap up what I'm saying here, the greatest mystery, that's what you want to go after. That's basically the thesis of the essay. What's the greatest mystery that there is? Actually, what do you think is the greatest mystery that there is? Like, what's the greatest mystery that you can imagine right now that humans are kind of after?
It's a good question. I think I would agree with you that I would say just the nature of the universe, and that's a very broad.
Yeah.
It's a very broad umbrella.
It's what the physicists are after.
Well, the physicists are after one piece of it, I think. But the physicists in their own right are, I think, very, I don't know, myopic.
They're narrow on the material.
They're narrow on the material,
right?
And specifically the big goal in physics that a lot of people gravitate toward is like a theory of everything. What is the one equation that generates the whole universe?
And it has to be elegant.
Sorry?
And it has to be elegant.
It has to be what?
And it has to be elegant.
Yes.
Is what they imagine.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the elegance, yes, is in the eye of the beholder, but yeah, there's some like seemingly this idea that if we get this one equation, then we will understand everything, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. Like, there are many different lenses through which you can look at the world, and you can't necessarily. Maybe theoretically you can derive everything from fundamental physics, but in practice it's very impractical to do so, and you need a lot of different lenses to look at the world through, right? Like figuring out the possibilities of bio, what is the absolute limit of what biology can do, is a completely different bucket of stuff than let's say just the kind of Planck scale fundamental physics stuff, right? Human dynamics, human nature, that's a whole other thing. Could you in theory derive human nature from biology? Sure, but it's like, it's just like different buckets of stuff. And so I think understanding all of that as well as possible is the thing that I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, so mystery is us being presented by incredibly curious phenomena right in front of us, and then trying to dissect and understand it. Like knowledge. Going after knowledge and trying to like understand everything. Yeah, I vibe with that. So, and I talk about that in my essay, which is that like not all knowledge is equal. Not all knowledge is equally stimulating in this sort of like mystery sort of purpose way. You can flip every rock on every sub-moon of every sub-solar system and be like, oh, nothing interesting there. You're collecting knowledge. It's like, oh, check mark, nothing there. It's new knowledge that is being accrued, but it's very uninteresting knowledge. And, we kind of have a time limit on our ability to do things.
There's an infinite number of facts in the universe.
Exactly. That you could go after that would not be useful. And then it's like, okay, what's the other end of the spectrum? What is the most useful, the most interesting, the most curious pieces of knowledge and information? And to me, the intelligence thing, climbing levels of intelligence and understanding what novel phenomenological categories might exist there, is what I've identified as sort of like the most interesting possible thing we could go after.
But it's also the highest leverage, right? Because as you ramp up intelligence, you increase your ability to just discover new stuff. So it also just helps everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you there. Um, One interesting thing you said that I kind of want to challenge you a little bit on is the porcupine argument.
Mm.
This idea that, well, I guess the one thing that stands out to me is like what makes you confident that we understand human nature well enough to think that we can change it, or like to think that changing it is a good idea.
Yeah, the latter is the right question. So,
Yeah.
Is sugar good for us?
No.
And yet human nature makes us want it.
Yeah.
So if you could change that part of human nature, would you do it?
I don't know if I would.
Okay. That might be a strong opinion from your side. I think most people, if they could say, I'd rather be a little less hungry all the time, and I'd rather randomly just want to exercise more often, and therefore I'd be a healthier, happier person, and I'd be entering optimization loops of self-improvement that would just put me on a better trajectory overall in life, I think most people would probably hop on board for that. And the porcupine argument is an attempt to say sexuality is a similar math game, where the reason we desired simple sugar the reason we desire simple sugar now is because our ancestors never came across it. And when they did, it's like, eat that fucking shit up because it's not going to be around forever, right? Get it. And sexuality is similar, right?
Yeah.
You need to mate in order to procreate, like get it. And that made sense. But look at, I'm sure anybody listening or you could think of a number of examples of guys, I think it happens more to you, but that have like completely redesigned their life and like maybe 50% of their thinking and like generally like how they look and what they do and what car they buy and all this stuff around the idea that they want to attract women, or the other way around, women for men, or, non-binary, whatever you want. And that's a lot. That's a lot of your personal effort that is just sort of like a little voice in the back of your head that is always nudging you in a certain direction. It's almost more insidious than sugar in the sense that it like designs your entire life around this desire, this fetish, which has been societally and culturally developed into something that is normal because that's how humans have procreated, survived Christianity for a long ass fucking time. But if you take a hard step back and you really thoroughly just say like, all right, I'm just a conscious floating thing. What desires and what behaviors would I want to install into my operating system? It certainly wouldn't be a desire to fetishize porcupines. That would be super low on the list. Super high on the list would be theoretical astrophysics. Like just getting off on, co-working with other theoretical astrophysicists and doing physics. That'd be really high on the list. If I had to have some intrinsic fetish desire thing, right? Sex is rod appendages and mushy cavities and like lumps of flesh and stuff. Like that's it. And yet we're like, very smart scientists have like ruined their careers over it.
But on the other hand, you say that love is a beautiful example of intelligence, and it's like one of the peak kind of human experiences. Mm. And I don't think that you can necessarily separate love from sexual desire.
Yeah, okay. So
sure, the
Greeks,
different types of love.
Yes, 7 or 8 of them.
But the kind of love there's certainly a kind of very passionate love that is deeply
that
sexual.
is one of the loves, passionate romantic love, and it's like lower on the list. The Greeks were like, man, platonic love, you've got friendship love, you've got like mother-son love, you've got father-son, you've got like, all sorts of different loves. I forget all of them, and again, tip of the iceberg. Maybe this is just the very beginning of an entire blossoming. Imagine the kind of love that you could feel for a comrade that you were developing new physics knowledge for, and the orgasm to that and the love and the feelings and the songs that you would write would eclipse everything we've ever seen from rod appendages, mushy cavity love. It's something to consider. I think the point of the porcupine argument is not to tell people to go get a vasectomy or to go get, actually I considered seriously when I was 16, 17, becoming a eunuch.
Really?
I seriously considered it. Not only do you get 5 more years of life on average.
Really?
Testosterone turns out to be pretty bad for you.
Oh.
Also, I would be a kind of superpower because I would not have distraction of the female, right? I would just be sort of like on my mission. Science, done, right? I'd have no, it's like I'm eliminating a desire that I could tell rationally was just not worth it. So Anyway, I rambled for a bit, but that's the porcupine argument is meant to inspire a conversation about human desires that are baked in and questioning whether we should just accept it willy-nilly just because it happens to be baked in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
What do you think? Would you pick the porcupine?
No, but I think that in certain isolated cases it makes sense to question your human nature, and there are a lot of things that yeah, like the rational part of your brain is in conflict with human nature all the time, and it's this, I think part of developing wisdom is learning to control your desires and to prioritize long-term thinking over short-term thinking and all this stuff, right? But I just think that if you take the ideas that, well, we can change human nature to their limit, then you might end up with some pretty dystopian and pretty dysfunctional worlds. After all, like, what is the 20th century if not one big experiment of kind of changing human nature and just kind of questioning the place of human nature, right?
So now make that same argument to bacteria. Before there were multicellular organisms, they had it good. They owned the planet and they were metabolizing. They were doing their thing.
It's true.
Life was good. And then one bacteria decided to go inside of another one, endosymbiosis, and a revolution started. And I'm sure that if the bacteria could talk, they'd be like, yo, man, don't ruin it for everybody. Why are you exploring all this new territory when we've got it good? And if that had never happened, we would never have, the Cambrian explosion. It would just never have happened. And so you're positing a very sort of conservative perspective, in a way, conjecturing that there is not more good to be had by experimenting.
Yeah, I'm trying to provide a counterweight to your argument.
That's right.
And I think that there's and I do agree with you. But I think we need to be careful how we thread that needle.
That's fair.
As to not lead to we want a utopian future. We don't want a dystopian future. And you host a salon in this room about how like whether we think that the world is getting better or not, and like how's humanity doing. And I mean, I think that there is a way forward where we can thrive, but we shouldn't be blind to the dangers that are all around us. And I think that as we develop more technology, we also develop more ways to kind of fuck it all up for ourselves, right?
I got this book recently. Mary Shelley wrote the book Frankenstein, which for somebody who wants to create new biology like myself is kind of a perfect tale of the scientist creator in love with creation, creating for its own sake, and yet creating unethical and dangerous things that then society rejects. Totally. I think OpenAI is doing this brilliantly. The rollout of new AI features has been awesome. Every time that there's a new advance in, especially the artistic world, obviously fine art was the first one on the chopping block. And you saw the Instagram comments for the first month or two. It was artists getting thousands of likes being like, wow, but where are the jobs? And but what about the copyrights for all the artists and blah, blah, blah. They had all these issues. And now it's been about a year, I think. You don't see that anymore. Now it's actually people just kind of excited, curious about the actual detail of the image. I think the silent majority was kind of just whatever. And so, yeah, this sort of slow rollout. And at the end of the day, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and we are small fry individually. And also our projects, individual companies that are 100 people big is still small fry compared to literally the rest of the planet. So you don't want to upset them. You want to help instead, right? Yeah. I think that's kind of the goal. So, no, I agree. Build ethically, for sure. Yeah.
Ethically.
Not only that, be a little conservative. Be a little on the conservative side in what you're building, because we do have it good. It's just there are Imagine the world was divided up this way. There was 5% of the population that just couldn't help themselves. They wanted to explore. They were itchy being sedentary, and they needed to build rockets and build new technology and build new stuff to explore the frontier. And it just so happened to be that the way nature responded was that it was very easy with new technological exploration to develop very dangerous things that individual people could use to destroy the rest of humanity. We're lucky that atom bombs turn out to be pretty difficult to build in your garage. But it could have been that it was not. Imagine it was just like a design and this much, baking powder and this much vinegar and exactly in this ratio, and boom, we got an atomic bomb. Nature could have responded that way, and it didn't. So because we don't know what's underneath the tip of the iceberg and we don't know what triggers may exist that will enable humans to be uniquely dangerous to other humans, I'm thinking specifically about viruses. Viruses, little programs, and if you just make the right code, it's literally 1,500 base pairs, and it's COVID 10.0.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest one.
We've just had a test run of that.
Yes.
Where people in the Holocaust, right? It's like
Yeah.
It's pretty scary stuff.
So yeah, anyway, I'm going on resonating with what you're saying. I agree, and I think it's worth spending the time to iterate that it is important to be ethical and to be considerate and a little bit on the conservative side, especially for technologies that seem like they could trigger uniquely dangerous events.
Yeah. One thing I want to get your take on, and I don't know if you thought about this at all, but it seems like the other side of the coin here in this discussion is maybe we should make our society more robust to existential risk, to technology. So it's yes, we should be conservative and take account of all the risks in when we're actually developing the tech, but I think there's also something to be said about, well, how can we engineer society such that if a disaster happens, it doesn't break everything, doesn't wipe out civilization entirely. Right? Do you think about that at all?
Yes, building resiliency and building adaptability. I think this is kind of the answer to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to adapt. It's going to happen. It's going to be bad, and there may be some thresholds that we cross. And I don't but the level of change of society that would need to happen in order for us to curve our emissions the way that and Tesla's making a dent, and obviously government policies and efficiency. These things are genuinely making dents, but it's still probably the temperature's going to rise by 2 degrees. And so we need to adapt. Like Florida, we got to protect Florida or get people out of there, or I don't know, whatever. New York, you got to build walls. And then look at other territory where it's a little higher elevation. Let's just start moving. Let's do this, right? I think it'll be possible to adapt. So there are ways to adapt for sure. On the bio front, on the virology front, it's a tough problem. How do you create a universal vaccine to create a universally awesome immune system right across all of humanity?
It worries me that we basically didn't learn any lessons
from COVID. We did. mRNA vaccines turned out they worked. I mean, myocarditis was a thing for actually our demographic, but it still, information injected into the human system can trigger immune protection. That's fucking amazing.
But though on the other hand, a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but some people were talking about new ways of quarantining people, maybe tracking the spread of disease, that kind of stuff. It doesn't seem like a lot of the lessons there got carried over at all. If I were to look at all of the quarantine policies that happened during COVID, a lot of them weren't that effective. It was more theatrical than anything. I had a friend who was kind of back home in the States for part of COVID, and he came back, and he was legally required to quarantine in his house. But he was living with 5 or 7 roommates at the time. None of them were required to quarantine. So it's if the point is to create a barrier between the potentially infected person and everyone else, it's you're not doing that, right?
Physical quarantine. Yeah, it was such a disaster. I just come on. You're sure the masks, but the airflow is still moving around. Like, it's not perfect at all. And like, physical quarantining is definitely something you can do, but maybe it's like 5-10% at most. That's going to, and people, like, frequent hand washing probably makes a bigger difference than wearing masks. Like, if people like religiously frequently hand washed, I think that would actually make a bigger difference, because like people touch their face all the time, they touch stuff, and then it's like a physical contact, and then like, you know, the titer's the amount of virus that you're getting in that one hit. That actually makes a difference to like, anyway, yeah, there's a bunch of things. We can talk about like physical quarantining. I don't think that's like the answer. It's not like we're going to suddenly create innovations that are like, make physical quarantining 10 times better, and like that's the solution. I don't think so. Maybe if we all get addicted to Apple Vision Pros and then we just like don't leave our cubicle.
Stay in our house.
All right, no disease, but also like, you know,
get food delivered by Amazon drone.
That's right. Yeah. No love. Let's literally just contact robots and that's it. Now we're safe. Great. But now we have a new, right? We're free, but our new prison is our own home, right?
Have you heard of Death Stranding, the Hideo Kojima game?
No.
It's literally about that. It's basically like this post-apocalyptic world where everybody just, you know, lives in their own bunker, and you play as this delivery guy delivering packages to all these different places. But it's like, you don't see any of the people that you're delivering to. They literally just, you know, like appear as a hologram. So, like, oh yeah, thanks, great.
That's funny.
Their whole life.
So yeah, you're just always interfacing, and you probably wouldn't even notice for a long time. I don't know. I remember actually there were a few days during COVID when I realized by the end of the day, I had interacted with a lot of people, and it had actually been a stimulating day socially, and yet I actually hadn't seen anybody else that I like knew in that entire day. Like, because it was all Zoom, right? It was all Zoom calls, but there was like group Zoom calls, and it was one-on-one Zoom calls, and they were intense. Like, I had to be there and like physically feel like, but like it wasn't this. I went to the grocery store or something, but I didn't meet anybody I knew.
Yeah.
It was a very physically isolating experience, which probably is not good for humans. Actually, it's almost certainly not good for humans. So we have to take the risk. You know, you have to risk living to live. You have to risk, you have to take some risk in order to live at all.
Yeah, that's funny. That makes sense. But on the other hand, if you take the, you know, longevity stuff seriously, then maybe the best course of action is to just stay in, minimize risk.
The problem is that, I've thought about this. I've actually thought about this sort of like aesthetic life. You like literally just go into a cave and just be as healthy as, but like Brian Johnson basically, but just like not with $2 million a year. It's actually not a bad strategy.
Like Brian Johnson travels a lot. He takes a risk every time he crosses the street. You know? The
problem though is that, so this is, I think, the reason he does it. There's 5 major lifestyle things that you have to do. Exercise, diet, sleep, stress, and community. It turns out being in a choir is a great thing for your health. And it's whatever, some equivalency, like just as good as quitting smoking. Something crazy like that. It's like, whoa, what's going on there? Probably not that good. But what's going on there?
There's a Novus plug in there somewhere.
Yeah, yes! Join Novus. You will live longer just by being part of the community. You have my permission to use that for advertising. At the end of the day, like, just live longer, because in the year 2070, imagine this, you set a resolution for yourself that is like, I want to put a ton of effort into being a great engineer that develops this next gen thing that allows them to be more intelligent and to spread that. And your AI buddy is assigned to you and has that driven into them. And now they organize your calendar, everything, with little hints, little nudges all the time to be working a little better, gives you better information, is your coding assistant, is whatever, everything. And it enables you to do that. I think that'll totally happen.
That's the dream. Yeah.
That's the dream, and it's totally just going to happen. So to me, it's like the aesthetic life makes some sense. I had this mnemonic that I made up when I was in grade 11, which was, vanity today is insanity tomorrow. As in, any dollars you spend on vain, superficial things on yourself today is worth $1 million in the future if you had instead saved that money, because the future is going to be so much better than today that you should just save every dollar and everything and just learn stuff and just protect yourself. so that you can exist in that future, because I thought it was going to be that much better.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I haven't thought of it in exactly that way, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Vanity today.
I like that.
Insanity tomorrow. Maybe I'll make a little song. Vanity today, insanity tomorrow.
Do it.
That was actually not bad.
We'll link it in the show.
Yeah, we got the music jam coming up.
I wanted to ask you about Acorn, the company that
Let me get the alcohol.
Let's go. Yeah. So you started Acorn in 2017?
2015.
Right? 2015.
It officially reincorporated in 17, 18.
How old were you at the time?
I guess I would have been 22.
Damn, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. And like, so how did that happen? I'm curious to go.
By the way,
how did you? Yeah,
I'll tell that story.
Yeah.
I recently, Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky, two
Gs.
OGs, thank you. In, obviously neuroendocrinology on the Robert Sapolsky side, and Sam Harris speaks for himself. They just had a conversation about free will. And one of the things that came out was pride is an emotion that doesn't really make sense.
Of course, that's something I'd say. Yeah. Okay.
It just makes it makes sense from like a free will perspective. You didn't invent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't invent your circumstances. You didn't invent what you were about to say now. You could not have said something different, really. And so I had a little bit like of a moment there where you were like, "How old are you? 22?" And I felt like you were like, "Oh, impressive." And I had a little bit of like a gut reaction. It was like, "Look at me." But then I realized, wait a minute, pride cometh before the fall, or something. I don't know.
Now introducing the fall.
The fall. Here we go. And I'm all the way down right now. But it actually does make sense for it to be, and it's not even a tasteful emotion either. Anyway, so how did Acorn start? I've been thinking about longevity strategies forever. I did my undergrad at Waterloo. I was working in synthetic biology, always finger on the pulse as to like what are the trajectories, what are the movements of like deep biology as it relates to like cell biology, and then also what's going on in the business world. Kickstarter was a thing. Waterloo was a very enterprising startup-y sort of university. I saw a freezer at a prof's lab that had super old samples, super deep beyond the frost. And I had the concept of, wait a minute, if I put some of my own cells there and they froze over and this prof kept his tenure for another 30 years, later on I could do a postdoc and I could like compare the young Steven cells to my old Steven cells and do a thesis, whatever. That'd be kind of cool. But then I realized those cells are actually viable. They could actually divide into other stuff. And if that is the case, then we can de-differentiate them, turn them into any cell type, basically. And it's a veritable gold mine of your own young self to, here's a technical term, autologously, so yourself to self. So there's no immune system rejection. Use your own young material for your old body when we've invented through. So that remains the core thesis behind the company. It's pivoted more now, years later. Oh my God, I founded it like 8 years ago. Yeah. It has pivoted more into like cosmetic, like this was going to show me. It's pivoted more into like cosmetic biotech. Like that's where it's found product market fit. But still the core thesis remains. You preserve cells because they might be useful in the future. Young compared to old. And Acorn has honestly really thrived under Drew. It's been he's a good thing.
Does it matter how many cells you cryopreserve? Is that like a factor?
That's an interesting, actually, it's an interesting question. It's like a practical question too. Like, how much pain are people willing to go through, right? Like, I, being as TechCrunch when they wrote about Acorn, they said if you're neurotic enough, that's the word they used, neurotic. All right, I'm neurotic enough. If I had to, I would literally cut off like the tip of my left pinky, because that would be a really nice diverse source of a whole bunch of cells that would be frozen. So Acorn plucks hair. So 50 is the number that we landed on. Suspiciously round number, actually. But it turns out that is actually more than enough. That's the thing. It's like more than enough, and it's memorable, and it's a good number. So yeah, it matters, because imagine you're not just going to replace your liver. Like, 3 years from now, or sorry, I should say 30 years from now, you get into an accident, or you've been drinking your whole life and your liver is starting to go, you could use a young replacement. You go to your bank and you're like, do I use all of them? Do I want more of the same stash later? Right? There's that kind of question. How discrete can this be? In the future, it could be that we grow them indefinitely. At any growth event, you actually divide them. You keep growing this one for liver, and then this one you grow and you repackage and freeze again.
Yep.
So there's a lot of possibilities.
And in theory, you could make that stash as arbitrarily big as you want. Right?
In theory.
If you're willing to.
Yeah. In practice, it's not as possible. But in theory, yes.
What are some of the obstacles that
to exactly that situation that we were just describing?
Yeah.
So different cell types want to divide more than others. So you can think of humans as being like a fountain. And some parts of us are fountains that are fountaining faster than others. The brain, neurons don't fountain very fast at all. In fact, they didn't divide whatsoever, but it turns out they do just a little bit. Your skin is fountaining all the time. You've probably heard this. You don't have the same skin as 7 years ago. Whoa. And it's true. Your endothelial lining, your gut lining, it's literally just like pushing new cells to be destroyed all the time. So there's little stem cells that are pushing new cells out, which do their job, and then they die and they fluff off. When you piss, you literally piss cells out because, and I'm sure when you poo, it happens. Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again? I lost the train of thought entirely.
Just like what are the obstacles to?
Some cells do it better than others, and so when you freeze cell populations and you want to, so the more embryo-like the cells are, the more happy they are to divide indefinitely. The more you determine them, the more you say, now your heart, now your neuron, they gain these properties. The human genome is like an OS, and then turning it into a heart cell or a liver cell is sort of like saying, now you are a computer that has been completely retuned from the base OS to being really good at fabricating chips. You're really good at fabricating, or I don't know, doing music, whatever. Very different functions, but same base algorithm. The one that wants to do chips, or let's just use the heart, will divide somewhat, but the one that wants to do neuron won't divide at all. So that's one of the big kind of barriers, is that some cell types don't want to divide quite as much as other cell types. And it's just practically difficult to get cells to kind of divide indefinitely in the laboratory as well. But it is possible. It's just that's kind of a shaky area.
Makes sense. And so, you start this in the mid 2010s. How does it go at first, and how long does it take you guys to actually like get a prototype up, get maybe some initial validation?
Early days were definitely slow. Pre-orders, sort of like just seeing whether people out there would even give us money just to like confirm that there was some demand from a market. Went through the standard sort of like pitch competition cycle, velocity 25K. We got into Y Combinator pretty early, which was very lucky actually. So it's a little bit like a year in we did, Justin Kahn, he founded Twitch.
Sure.
He was one of the group partners at YC at the time. And he thought for fun, he would do, you can get an interview with YC by taking over my Snapchat and doing your pitch on my Snapchat. And if I think it's cool enough, you get an interview. And so we did that, and we got an interview, and I got in, which was sweet. And I actually have that video on my YouTube channel, StephenTenholder.com. And then, I don't know. It's the standard sort of grind. Like I could go on, I could wax for a while here. There were a lot of scientific experiments we had to do to sort of like do basic validation. There were people we had to convince, like regulatory was always sort of like an open question, because we are neither providing a treatment nor a diagnosis today. All that's happening is we're freezing your cells and taking your money. That's technically what's actually just happening. And so, a few years later, I remember Health Canada gave us a call. I don't know if I should say this, but anyway, Health Canada. No, it's actually fine, because actually Acorn has gone above and beyond. Like that's the answer that we did. We were like very conscientious about it. Actually, we were like, all right, it's not actually clear. Like we literally found the guy who created the policies for Canada, and we talked to him. We were like, and we gave him money. You tell us exactly what the fuck we should do. And it actually gave some clear guidance. which is that like pretend these cells are going to be injectable. Like treat it to the same level of standard as like what you would inject in a person. And then just treat that, as soon as you get the cells from people, clean them, freeze them as though they're going to be injected. So that was one of the big barriers. Going to Toronto, Drew, getting an actual cryogenic facility was a whole thing. Yeah. And then marketing was another big one. I was pretty gung-ho on a kit. 23andMe. So you send your saliva in a kit.
The kit gets mailed to you, you do everything at home, then you send it back.
As a customer, you literally just take the kit, do it, and send it back. What's great is that you can market to anybody. You can market very broadly. And I thought only other neurotic longevity people like me would really want to do this. Therefore, you can market on the internet and you can sell on the internet. So it has to be a kit. Anyway, so we worked on that for a long time. I have a bunch of 3D printed nostalgia behind me, which was the attempts to do that. We have a worldwide patent on this kit, which is something very cool. Anyway, I could go on. There's a lot there, but yeah, it was a long story. Eventually, we launched product 2019, and it has continued to grow slowly since then.
And when did you find product market fit? Like, when did you realize that, well, actually, the cosmetics industry and kind of beauty people are more into it than the longevity crowd?
I'd say that's like 2020-ish, like actually right around the time when I was leaving. Yeah, for about a year before I was leaving, or before I left, the exploration was at times depressing. Like we would literally go to like trade shows of like, I don't know, exercise people, or trade shows of, I guess like medical tourism-y type people, and trade shows of tech people. We sponsored Collision one year. We paid, I should just use numbers. We paid $25K to sponsor Collision. Like Acorn was like, when you're like at the sponsors and you're like,
yes,
we were like platinum sponsor or something like that. And we had a big ass booth. We had giant panels. We were awesome. It was great. It was such a fun time. But other than, 10 Star Trek fans, it wasn't quite, and that actually was the case. We bonded over Star Trek. And that is who I thought the original customer would be. And basically everybody who had ever heard just like the concept, freeze your cells because it's super inexpensive and you might as well because you could live longer. That seems like foolproof logic to me, but it doesn't seem to be the same for everybody. So, split for markets, and then Drew credit. I think he really discovered and lynched onto it.
What was your role throughout all this? Like,
that's a good question. I mean, it was my concept, and I had like incubated it and started it, and I was the CEO for the first 3 years. When Drew came on, I became COO. And so, I created the website, for example. I did a lot of technical work. I did scientific work. I was a jack of all trades. Like I did a little bit of everything. And then, as the company matured, my role became a little more ambiguous, honestly. Even on my LinkedIn, I think I took it off, but at one point I was Chief Innovation Officer, which was like, basically, I'm just here for fun. Like, I don't know. Like, what does that even mean?
But I mean, like, at some level, titles are bullshit anyway.
Right. But, I'm a 0 to 1 type person. I'm definitely very, like, engineer stuff, create products, like, product development kind of person. And Acorn didn't need that anymore. Acorn really was sort of like sales and service. Need of it. So I transitioned.
And what made you kind of exit the company? And was it just like your interest changed?
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, while I had an interesting idea in my undergrad to bank cells for the future, it's a bit of a procrastination on the answer, isn't it? Right? Like it's sort of saying like, all right, let's let the other scientists figure this out. We're going to bank the cells. And like, It's actually a good idea. And I think it's worth doing 100%. I've done it in triplicate. But I want to join. I don't want to, I want to put the rest of the time and effort that I still have at my disposal to contribute and to like still work on the therapeutics that will make a difference and will actually use those cells for something. It also may not be the case that we'll use cells autologously. So that means your own cells for your own future self. It could be, as Shinya Yamanaka, one of the like OG scientists in Japan who discovered induced pluripotent stem cells, he's working on allogenic, which means a universal bank of cells. Like imagine just a bank of cells that were like engineered to be magic. you could grow heart, liver, kidney, whatever, and from that, you could transplant into people. Anything you want. That's kind of amazing. So that's the allogenic dream. And if that comes true, Acorn will definitely just be toast. I don't think it'll be true, but it'll be somewhat true. And I think it'll contribute. And I think it will contribute immensely in ways that biologists are underappreciating right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious, like, a lot of people obviously have startup ideas, a lot of people work on projects, but it's quite rare for that project to be successful, to actually take off. So I'm curious what you learned along the way in that process, and what are some, I guess, pitfalls you avoided? Because I'm assuming that there were a lot of challenges, there were a lot of situations where, you know, things look dire, right?
Believe in yourself. I don't know. This is where I can say some French stuff, man. You're leaving it open.
But I mean, like, more, I guess, specific to your company and to your industry.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'm kind of focused.
Do you have kind of a specific, like, examples?
People are super useful, but also super problematic. So you have to, like, as a CEO type person, which is basically every founder, even if you're the CTO, you're a CEO thinking person, or else you're not a CTO. You're going to become head of research eventually if you're not a CEO thinking person. So you see people as resources. Obviously, they're human beings with ethics and etc. But also, okay, yeah, maybe this is the best lesson. How to be disagreeable tastefully. As in, like, the people who I think are the best leaders are not just people who have really great vision and can command a room and can tell people, like, what they need to do when they need to do it. When shit starts hitting fans, and that will happen if you're actually onto something, people get greedy. You have competitors that will actually knife you for real, like actual dog-eat-dog stuff. And there are employees of yours that you'll have to fire, or employees that you'll have to say, like, look, you need to do better work, and you tell them that for a month. And you're the bad guy, actually. Like, Steve Jobs was an asshole. Apparently, since before Apple, he was just an asshole through and through. So how do you be a tasteful asshole? It's actually, so, and by that I mean, like, somebody who can deliver hard information to people that upsets them in a way that makes them, at the end of the day, actually create better product.
Yeah, I forget where I read this. It might have been the Ben Horowitz book. I think he was talking about how, or maybe it was like the Tony Fadell build a book or something like that. But the author was talking about how there are different types of assholes. There are, like, assholes that are maybe self-centered or have their own interests in mind, and then there are assholes who just really care about the mission or the product, and they're assholes because, well, they actually want to push people to do better work, right? And so I think motivation's really important there as well.
Steve Jobs probably succeeded in being an asshole with Apple because he had such a compelling vision.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One closing question I want to ask everyone on this podcast is, who are the people that inspire you, and who are the people that you've learned from?
All right, since this is a video podcast,
all right,
I'm going to give you the Bible.
Let's do it.
It's literally right here. Scientific American, 1994. This is, all right, we got Carl Sagan. We got Stephen Jay Gould. I mean, him versus Richard Dawkins is kind of Dawkins is accused of being a reductionist. Stephen Jay Gould is hard to fucking read. Marvin Minsky, a godfather of AI. Steven Weinberg. We got Robert Cates, Robert Krishner. Honestly, I don't know these other people very well. But Carl Sagan would be at the top. Richard Feynman would have been an excellent addition to this. I'll put that up later. So yeah, Carl Sagan, Richard Feynman, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. He's like a modern living legend. Elon Musk, Sam Altman. I think that's pretty good.
Kanye West.
Kanye! Yes! You could end it with Kanye.
Very nice.
I mean, he's not... Okay, the thing is funny, he's got epicness. Like, he understands the epic quality of life itself, and he's an artist about epicness.
Yeah.
So I respect his sort of, like, unapologeticness, and his sort of, like, he takes Carpe Diem seriously.
Yes, he does. Cool. Well, on that note, thank you for coming on, for talking to me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Sav, I enjoyed it as well. Join the Novus podcast. Airing on... I can't do it.
But actually, join the Novus podcast. Give us views. We need views.
Views, recommendations.
Likes.
Subscribe.
Comment, like, and subscribe.
Actually, apparently on podcasts, if you write a review, not just click a star on a review, if you actually write a review, it helps the podcast the most.
Okay.
In terms of, like, the algorithm or
If
whatever.
you're listening to this, stop whatever you're doing. Go write a review.
Yeah. Put your broom down. Put the dumbbells down. Get on your phone and write a fucking review for us.
All right. Cool.